Welcome to episode 42 of Toke Signals TV, where we bring you the biggest in cannabis and hemp news stories every week. I'm Steve Elliott, editor at tokesignals.com, and I'll be guiding you through the news. First of all, let's look at our Toke Signals Bud Pick of the Week. We have an interesting strain here called Industrial Plant. Not what I would have named it, but it's got some great genetics going on. Afghani times Hawaiian, a 50-50 mix of indica and sativa. It's great medicine, and it's possible to smoke this all day and to remain functional. I know, this is the voice of experience. You can get this at Green Thumb Silverdale in Kitsap County, Washington, and it's $9 a gram. Let's do the news now, shall we? In the United States, the FBI says it may have to let in potheads to get the very best computer hackers. Yeah, the FBI's long-standing policy of no tolerance for marijuana use has forced that law enforcement agency to turn away the very best computer hackers, and now they're looking at letting them in. I have to hire a great workforce to compete with these cyber criminals, and some of those kids smoke weed on the way to the interview, said FBI Director James Comey. Congress has funded the FBI to add 2,000 new jobs this year, and many of those recruits will be assigned to the rapidly expanding Cyber Crimes Unit. And that's where the problem arises, according to Comey, who said a lot of the nation's top computer programmers and hackers really like cannabis. Comey said the FBI is currently grappling with how to change its marijuana policies. The agency last changed its pot policy back in 2007 when it got rid of requirements that excluded anyone who had used cannabis more than 15 times in their entire lives. That absurd rule was chucked in favor of a 3-year limit. If more than 36 months had passed since you last toked up, you've been good to go to be a G-man for the past 7 years. Other illicit substances are banned for the past 10 years for potential applicants, according to the agency. So here's a rare instance of a federal agency actually differentiating between pot and other substances to the extent that they are de facto admitting marijuana is less harmful. The FBI's pot rules are even more strict than those of the Central Intelligence Agency, which only requires 12 months abstinence from drugs, according to the CIA's website. One conference attendee on Monday asked Comer about a friend who hadn't applied to the FBI because of its pot policy. He should go ahead and apply despite his marijuana use, Comer replied. Those of us who are used to the way bureaucrats operate, once we saw this statement in this story, we're doing a mental countdown, 10, 9, 8, until this guy backtracks and does some spin control. And of course, within about 24 hours, that exact thing happened. Comey backtracked and said, I am absolutely dead set against using marijuana. I did not say that I am going to change that ban. Moving to the next story. The United States federal government may cut off water for legal marijuana crops. Some marijuana farmers may soon find themselves with some thirsty plants if the federal government decides to block the use of federal water for state legal cannabis cultivation. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation is in charge of managing federal water resources, and at the request of various water districts in the West, the Bureau is evaluating how the Controlled Substances Act applies in the context of reclamation project water being used to facilitate marijuana-related activities, according to spokesman Peter Soth. Local water districts in Colorado and Washington state contract with federal water projects, and officials from some of those districts said they think the federal government will turn off the water. Certainly, every indication we are hearing is that their policy will be that federal water supplies cannot be used to grow marijuana, claimed Brian Werner of Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District, which is in charge of about a third of the water for northeastern Colorado. Meanwhile, in Washington state, the Rosa Irrigation District, which supplies federal water to about 72,000 acres in Yakima and Benton counties, has issued a precautionary message to water customers who may be involved in state legal marijuana grow operations. Local irrigation districts operating federal irrigation projects have recently been advised that under federal reclamation law, it is likely project water cannot be delivered and utilized for purposes that are illegal under federal law. Rosa District Manager Scott Revelle wrote in letters to Yakima and Benton County commissioners. Presumably, growing marijuana would fall into this category, Revelle wrote. If water is so precious and scarce that it can't be used for state legal marijuana cultivation, it shouldn't be used for brewing and distilling more harmful intoxicating substances like beer and liquor, countered Mason Tvert, Communications Director for the Marijuana Policy Project and a key backer of Amendment 64, which legalized marijuana in Colorado. While we appreciate how the Obama administration has made some administrative concessions to the majority of voters who support legalization by issuing banking guidelines and having the Justice Department largely stand out of the way of state implementation, this water issue highlights the urgent need to actually change federal law, said Tom Angel, chairman of Marijuana Majority. The impact could be worse in Washington than in Colorado, since the Bureau of Reclamation controls the water supply for about 2/3 of Washington's irrigated land, according to McClatchy. The Seattle Times has already printed an editorial urging the federal government to allow Washington marijuana farmers to use federal water. The Bureau of Reclamation is likely to announce a decision later this month. In Florida, where the push is on to pass a constitutional amendment legalizing medical marijuana, the vote no on 2 push against medical marijuana has begun. Amendment number 2, the medical marijuana question on Florida's ballot for the November general election, is supported by more than 80% of Sunshine State residents, according to the latest polls. But a new group, the Vote No on 2 campaign, has launched a website and video denouncing the amendment as legalizing weed for money for dope dealers. The organization claims that the amendment would allow unrestricted sale and use of cannabis by anyone, even minors, in a virtually unregulated setting like that in California. The group's web video uses scenes from the Venice Beach Boardwalk, where marijuana dispensaries and storefront doctors allow people to get authorized and buy medical marijuana within minutes. But backers of Amendment 2 deny these claims, saying the amendment is designed to allow only legitimate medical use under rules set up by the Florida Health Department and legislature. The video also, unfortunately, injects racial undertones into the debate, according to State Senator Oscar Brannan, a Democrat from Miami Gardens, who last week said its use of a black former drug dealer to stoke fears of unregulated marijuana sales is fear-mongering. Dee Reed, identified as a minister and former drug dealer in the video, says, "If the Amendment 2 was passed back in the day that I was pushing drugs, you just legalized me to sell and distribute drugs to all ages. All ages. You would never have stopped me." I think it's definitely playing on a racial undertone, trying to play on people's fear, Brannan said. It's ridiculous. I just don't understand why that's where they chose to go. The video has men and women of different ethnicities speaking on the issue, including a black educator, lamely responded Trey Evers, who works for the No on 2 group. The website and the hiring of Evers was done with $100,000 donated by St. Petersburg Republican anti-drug activist and right-wing nut job Mel Sembler. Not surprisingly, the Florida Sheriff's Association also opposes Amendment 2, and Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd, head of the statewide association, appears in the video, saying, quote, "Amendment 2 is not about those who are very sick. It's about money for dope dealers." The United for Care campaign in favor of Amendment 2 has far outstripped the No group in total fundraising, but has spent most of its war chest on the effort to qualify for the ballot. Most of the money was contributed by Orlando lawyer and political power broker John Morgan, a major Democratic philanthropist in the state. The website and video are both filled with half-truths, distortions, and outright lies, said Ben Pallara, campaign manager of United for Care. Floridians deserve a debate based on the facts, not disingenuous scare tactics. United for Care has already issued a point-by-point rebuttal of the vote no arguments. For instance, Florida law prohibits physicians treating minors without parental permission, so that part about minors getting medical marijuana without parental approval is patent nonsense. In Vermont this week, a new poll showed strong majority support for marijuana legalization. A big majority of Vermonters support making marijuana legal for adults, taxing it, and regulating it similarly to alcohol, according to this Castleton Polling Institute survey, which was released on Wednesday. Such a change in state law would be supported by 57% of respondents, with only 34% opposed. People are fed up with marijuana prohibition, said Matt Simon, New England political director for the Marijuana Policy Project. Marijuana is an objectively less harmful substance than alcohol, and this poll shows most Vermonters want it to be treated that way. The Vermont legislature in April approved a bill that includes an amendment initiating a study to evaluate the potential impact of making marijuana legal for adults and regulating it similarly to alcohol. Governor Shumlin is expected to sign that into law. Just about anyone who reviews the evidence objectively will arrive at the conclusion that prohibition has failed, and it's time for a more sensible approach, Simon said. Regulating marijuana like alcohol would replace the underground market with licensed, tax-paying businesses. There is a reason why we don't see copious amounts of alcohol being illegally produced and trafficked around Vermont. Because it's regulated, Simon said. In New Mexico this week, a court upheld insurance coverage for medical marijuana. An injured auto mechanic who uses medical marijuana to treat pain can have his former employer and the company's insurance provider reimburse him for the cannabis, a New Mexico appeals court ruled on Monday. The New Mexico Court of Appeals voted unanimously to uphold a previous workers' compensation court decision, also in favor of Gregory Villalpando, the 55-year-old former mechanic who suffered a lower back injury back in 2000. The Santa Fe man's former employer, Benz Automotive Services, and its insurance provider, Redwood Fire and Casualty, had tried to get out of reimbursing the mechanic for using medicinal cannabis as a pain treatment, pointing to marijuana's illegal status under federal law. New Mexico is the first state he's aware of where a workers' compensation board has approved insurance reimbursement for medical marijuana, according to Albuquerque attorney Peter White, who represents Villalpando. It's an important decision for workers so seriously injured they would be bound to a lifetime of narcotic medications, White said. It might be fairly unique, said Drug Policy Alliance staff attorney Tamar Todd of the ruling. New Mexico Court of Appeals Judge James Wexler's written opinion found the employer and its insurer had failed to cite a specific federal law they'd be forced to violate by reimbursing the man for his medical marijuana. The Workers' Compensation Board last year had approved Villalpando for medical marijuana as a pain treatment. A doctor found he suffered from some of the most extremely high intensity, frequency, and duration of pain out of thousands of patients that he had seen. In Bermuda this week, an activist wants immediate amnesty for medical marijuana growers. Activist Alan Gordon has demanded immediate amnesty for people who grow cannabis for gravely ill patients in Bermuda, saying that patients can't afford to wait. There is only one way to allow the immediate medical cannabis called for by the CRC report, said Gordon. The activist said he spoke on behalf of an unofficial collective of nearly 24 Bermuda growers. We need to just do it instead of shuffling paperwork, Gordon said. 80 small medical-grade cannabis trees are available to start, and over 50 medical cannabis strains are currently on the island. Gordon said he has a stack of cancer and MS patients' letters discussing a life or death need for medical cannabis in some cases, or in other cases discussing ailments so debilitating that many readers would be moved to tears. Some patients are stuck in Bermuda where affordable medicine is non-existent, and some Bermudian patients are stuck in America doing remarkably well but unable to come home with their life-saving medicine, Gordon said. Life-saving medicine should not be delayed by bureaucracy and forms. Cancer patients shouldn't wait one more day, nor be asked to break the law, Gordon said, calling delays a result of Bermuda dawdling and taking too long to emerge from the Victorian era. Absurdly high prices for cannabis mean that medical cannabis will be neither affordable nor safe, even for home grows, so long as the crop is banned for the public, Gordon said. If government means to allow medical access, then they need to do so. There are no other options. Since importing is not viable, and experienced local growers won't reveal their identities without amnesty. There can be no affordable medical cannabis unless the price is lowered, which cannot occur without devaluing the crop scarcity via home grows, and not by dictating that it be smuggled in, Gordon pointed out. Gordon said that Canadian court precedents suggest that in medical circumstances, the courts here are likely to strike down the cannabis ban entirely because the law grants medical permits but no actual cannabis. If we're not allowed to grow, then life-saving medicine is being withheld by our laws. It's that simple, Gordon said. I won't wait because lives are at stake. Gordon, who offers access to more than 50 locally available cannabis varieties, maintains that he generally respects authority and doesn't feel he's breaking the law due to the extraordinary circumstances because patients should not have to gamble on or worry about such things and should instead be assured of affordable access, not just permits. Gordon's outing of himself as a medicinal cannabis grower is not without risk. Please remember, he told me, that Bermudian society is so socially conservative that male shirtlessness was only found legal for the first time last year. In New Zealand this week, a good kitty brought its owner home a bag of weed, and that dumb owner called the cops. Cats are known to give such gifts as dead mice to their owners, but one cool kitty in New Zealand brought home a bag of weed, and too bad the owner was clueless. Police received a call from a woman in Halfway Bush, New Zealand on Sunday, saying her cat had left a bag of drugs on her doorstep. It was approximately 5 grams of cannabis, which has a street value of between $100 and $150, said Sergeant Reese Monroe of Dunedin. The cat's owner wanted those horrid drugs removed from the premises. Sergeant Monroe wouldn't identify the cat or its owner. You hear of cats bringing dead birds and rats home, but certainly in my career, I've never seen anything like this before, Sergeant Monroe said. We will continue our investigation and look at having the plastic bag fingerprinted. Before we go this week, there is a must-read story on tokesignals.com that you really ought to check out. It is written by a young comedian and activist named Michael Hain. He is also a columnist, and this is his first contribution to Toke Signals. I've known Michael for years, though, and he is quite a good writer. This story is Christie Prefers Online Gambling Over Marijuana for New Jersey, and it is a reaction to the fact that Governor Chris Christie, a presidential hopeful from New Jersey, supported legalizing online gambling in New Jersey, where the rules have just been loosened, yet he opposes marijuana legalization. And in fact, he said, I am not going to turn our state into a place where people fly into to get high. And if people won't legalize marijuana in the state, elect a new governor. You know, I think that's the best advice Chris Christie ever gave you folks. Until we meet again next week, my advice to you is to stay lifted. See you then.